Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Mission Motherhood Show brought to you by Cherie's Choice. I'm Cherie Bergeron. I'm the host and founder of Cherie's Choice, which is an organization helping women navigate infertility and finding their path to motherhood on their own terms. I am so excited to have Katie Bryan on our show today. Katie and I met, we became acquainted maybe about a year ago and kind of started to get to know each other, fellow Austinites. And I'm so excited to finally have you on the show.
Yes, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Of course. So let me just share a little bit about Katie's background for you guys. I've just really admired her journey as a single mother by choice and also her work in supporting other women on their motherhood journey. So, Katie is a mindset coach, community facilitator, and host of the Single Greatest Choice podcast. As I said, she lives in Austin with her adorable 5-year-old son, Miles, who we'll talk about, and a poorly behaved Cocker Spaniel, Oliver, I guess. Poor Oliver.
Yes,
Maybe he's
he
just
might pop up in the background here. I think he's napping, but
maybe he's just misunderstood.
maybe.
um, but Katie talks about the fact that motherhood was always part of the plan, but doing it alone wasn't. And when you found yourself single in your late 30s, solo motherhood was thought to be the last resort, but surprisingly became the single greatest choice of your life. And that unexpected decision brought fulfillment. And again, you've used that to build community around kind of choosing single motherhood. And I also know that you have been interested in creating a vibrant community of women who are bold and brave and navigating this path. And you're dedicated to helping women find clarity and confidence and connection in their solo motherhood journeys. So I think that is amazing. Of course, we're very aligned in all of that.
Yeah.
First, I know we just survived spring break, and you and I have something in common in that we both went and did things with our sons, kind of as a mom son thing. So, how did your spring break go?
Spring break was good. It's one of those places. I think I wrote a newsletter about realizing that I spent so much time early on, even before my son was born, but in those early years, sort of fixated on these problems that weren't happening yet and stressing out about how I would handle them. And then really getting to this point and realizing I wasn't the version of myself that I needed to be to solve the problem. And I didn't have any of the information that I would have needed. So that was just sort of wasted worry. But for me, spring break was really a mix of spending time with my son, but also feeling like whether or not I could take a week off of work, I didn't want to. I had things that I wanted to get done. And so how do I figure out that mix of supporting my needs, supporting his needs, having some fun, also not being around the clock, on as a mom? Where do I get some relief, some breaks? Sometimes for me, and just looking at how spring break went together, I'm like, okay, there's no way I could have planned for that several years ago when I was worried about, oh my gosh, what is it going to look like during all the school closures? And it really gave me some hope for it, because we're not in public school yet. He's starting kindergarten in the fall. So right now I have had around the year, around the calendar care, because daycare doesn't close in the summer. But moving forward, I'm like, I'm going to have to constantly be figuring out how to cover all of these school breaks. But what I ended up doing was using a mix of, my mom did take my son for a weekend, the first weekend of spring break. And I got a lot of I cleaned out closets and did things around the house. And it was
Okay.
really nice. And then my son and I traveled together. My mom has a house on the coast in Texas. So we met there and spent some time together with family. And then we came back and I utilized my gym has a day camp option. So he was there. He went to his school, had like a babysitting afternoon on campus. So he did that. I did parents' night out at the gym. So just sort of like piecemealing it together. And we had a whole adventure day where we went to the botanical gardens, and we went to the big public library downtown, and we went and ate ice cream and just sort of let the day take us wherever it led, in downtown Austin, which was really fun as well.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, so it was a good mix of like fun and also getting some stuff done.
Sure, that's awesome. We
Yeah.
went to Lake Tahoe. So every other year, my son and I go on a trip, just the two of us, because of course I have a daughter as well, but she goes to her father's every other year. And so we use this as kind of, we call it our scouting mission. And we will
Mhm.
go to places that we want to potentially take the whole family, but we will go and we will scout it out and stuff. So we had an incredible time out there. So
Oh, that's so
highly
cool.
recommend it. I
Yeah,
highly
that
recommend.
sounds great.
Yeah. Well, so for let's see, when I learned about single greatest choice and started to learn about you a little bit more, I mean, I was impressed by your ambition and your business savvy. And so, in what way did you feel being a strong businesswoman might have made finding the right partner more difficult?
That's a very interesting question. I did not at all feel that way because I was not a strong business woman, and it's even still a little bit disorienting to hear you describe me that way. I never intended to start a business, and now I do identify myself as a strong businesswoman, but that was never a part of my dating past or my identity. I'm sure I've always been a strong-willed woman, a
Yeah,
woman with like a lot of strong
knowing
opinions.
what you want, yeah, knowing what you
Yes.
want and kind of going after what you want and that sort of thing, and whatever you're doing, I think
Yes.
I think you've been that way.
Yeah, I was a full-time employee with the school district for actually 20 years, which makes me feel very old, but worked with the same employer for 20 years in education and never really intended to start a business. I started something that I would have called, well, I started the podcast and then I started kind of dabbling in coaching. But honestly, my initial plan was I wanted to go through this coach training because I'd been working with a coach and found it really beneficial. And I thought, well, I'll just do the practice hours and then however many clients it takes to pay myself back for the investment. And this was all just kind of during COVID. Like I thought it would just be something to do while we're all stuck at home. And I was also pregnant at the time, or I got pregnant kind of during that time. Never meant for it to be anything more than that. But the more I leaned into the coaching work, I realized I really, really love it. But also just the space of solo motherhood felt like this untapped, this space that really needed support and it needed community and a place for women to turn, not just around the logistics, but around the emotional experience of choosing something that in the beginning for many of us doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like it's a last case, last resort or a thing that's happening to us. And many women start, myself included, with some level of sort of victimization around how life has happened to us in this way that we've been brought to this place where we don't have much of a choice. If we want to be moms, it looks like, our option is to do it alone. And I had such a profound experience of shifting out of that into a more empowered space of really realizing that it absolutely was a choice and one that I'm really glad that I made and just couldn't shut up about it. So so it just kind of grew from there.
Right. Well, and I want to delve into that process. We talk a lot about, or I talk about fairy tales that we believe as we're growing up and what our life's going to look like and how we're going to find relationship and how motherhood will evolve. How did those earlier years go for you in terms of, did you feel that you were impacted by certain beliefs of how that was all going to unfold, that then when you ended up in your mid 30s kind of became some kind of awakening or realizing that what you believed really wasn't necessarily going to be true? How
Yeah.
did that impact you?
I mean, I remember sort of reaching a place where I could see the math laying itself out before me and kind of realized even if I met someone now, I don't want to wait the appropriate amount of time that I feel comfortable with, which in my mind was, minimum a year to get to know this person before having, moving forward with marriage, kids, what, any of that. And I just thought I'm out of runway. Like it just,
Mhm.
I still deeply believed that it would be better to be partnered, even though I had been partnered in the past and I do not want to be parenting with those people. And they were
Right.
fine people, right? But I had been married and then I had also been engaged and kind of broken off an engagement just right sort of before making that commitment again to the wrong person. And I knew those men were not men that would have made the process of parenting easier. It would have just been different. But still, I believed that somewhere out there was a person who wouldn't. And maybe that's true, but I hadn't found him. And I was 37 and, moving towards 38. And I just kind of had this wake up moment where I thought, I've run out of runway. And kind of along that same timeline, I did have a really great, probably the best relationship I've had. He's still a very close friend of mine. And I knew going into that, I knew from date one where I came home just on cloud nine, I was like, either this is my person, or if he's not, I'm done looking for him. So I'm really glad that I had that experience of having that last really positive relationship, because I feel like I don't have the sense that there aren't great men out there. I just knew for me that I was done waiting. And having met someone wonderful right at kind of the last minute, I'm like, okay, that can wait. He's out there. Others like him are out there. And we'll come back to that after I've made sure that I get to experience motherhood.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that a lot of times women who go into becoming a mother on their own sometimes feel like they're going to be single forever. And I think that's kind of a fatalistic view of things. But again, I think that goes to the fairy tales of a linear progression of meeting someone, marrying someone, having children with someone versus and sometimes I think women, we give away our power in that because we get very desperate. And certainly that was my experience. It sounds like you were much more grounded and didn't feel the temptation to settle for someone just to sort of fulfill that
Yeah.
prophecy,
I
right?
mean, that's very generous. I will say I absolutely was willing to settle, just not at that moment in time. Thankfully, by the time we got to 2018, I was a little bit more clear-eyed. But I will say the engagement that I referenced that happened earlier in my 30s, so I think I was 34 at the time, that was absolutely me um, just just saying this is good enough. I mean, I knew from the beginning that this was not a person that I likely would spend the rest of my life with. I think I imagined us having a kid or two together and then amicably separating. He was already a dad, so I was getting to experience his son. It's interesting, his son was actually the same age that mine is now when we met. And I remember doing with his son all the things I'm doing now with mine, and just how lovely it was mid 30s to suddenly have this 5-year-old to take to the park and to go to, the splash pad and all of those things that really felt like instant family. And so I ignored a lot of the signs that we were not. I think truly I fell in love with his son and with the lifestyle, and was willing to kind of see past things. And thankfully some real hard to ignore red flags popped up just in the nick of time. I'm very glad that I did not go forward with that. But it was it was really hard to admit to myself how much I was settling.
Yeah. I think that is a point of awakening for a lot of people. That happened to me as well, that I dated someone that had children because I was very um very tied to my career and the financial independence and the lifestyle that was offering me. But and so I really, for me, motherhood wasn't nearly as grounded in me as some women are saying, oh, I've always wanted to be a mother. But when I dated someone who had children, that was really the awakening point for me. So it sounds like that was true for you as well.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I think because of how embedded that was in just my identity of who I imagined myself to be, I was a little late to the sort of wake up call that it might not happen if I didn't get more intentional. I think that I just, we ask children, what do you want to be when you grow up? We don't ask, do you think you're going to find a partner and have kids? Like we just kind of assume that piece will happen. And um, yeah, I think I was really sort of startled to realize mathematically I was not fertility wise where I would like to be. It wasn't lining up for me. So
Right. Right. But so when you decide to go into single motherhood or consider that, I know you didn't enter into that choice lightly. What exploration did you do before concluding that, becoming a single mother was the right choice for you?
I'm not a person who thinks everything happens for a reason. Um, but I can look back and see the good in a lot of less than desirable circumstances. And I am thankful now that the first clinic that I went to was not one I would recommend to my worst enemy. And they created this doctor in particular created a sense of scarcity and fear in me that made me feel like it was now or never. It actually wasn't the reality of my fertility at the time, but it was a catalyst, and I'm grateful. What happened for me was that I met this man that I mentioned, who was just a lovely person and one of the healthiest relationships that I've had. And the day after our first date, I left town to go on a yoga retreat. And while I was in the airport, I got an email that had information from I had done an at-home fertility test. It was like a finger prick, and you mail it off and you get this information. I was 36 at the time, or maybe 37. And I think I just assumed it would come back saying I was in the average range, and that would be that. I felt like patting myself on the back for the responsible choice of taking the test in the first place. But instead it came back and it said I had diminished ovarian reserve. And, it's not it's not a doctor, but it's a piece of information, and I took it very seriously. And so in the same week, I'd had a great first date that felt really promising and this information about my potential fertility. And so I immediately decided, where I had said for years that I couldn't afford to do egg freezing. It's funny how all of a sudden my finances didn't change, but my priorities did.
Yeah.
And so I decided to freeze eggs while I was in this new relationship. And that was all I was planning to do. But the strain of the stress I was feeling around the urgency of my fertility and just that not lining up with where this relationship was, having just met one another, it just created a lot of anxiety for me. And then I had this doctor saying, well, this isn't good. This doesn't look great. Just like really kind of making it feel like I had pretty limited options. And he even said to me, you need to decide if this is Mr. Right or Mr. Right now, because we need to get going on this, which I don't know why I took relationship advice from this guy who,
Yeah.
but I mean, I felt like the relationship didn't have time to develop because of the
Sure.
pressure that I felt. And so I didn't do a lot of research. I didn't do a lot of considering. I think before I met this man that I dated briefly, I think I had said things like, maybe I'll just get a sperm donor, but I couldn't even say it with a straight face. Like, it was not something I was actually considering. It was just something that felt like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be hilarious if that's where I ended up, right? But no part of me believed that would be the case for me. But when I got there to this point, and the relationship just I couldn't give it the space it needed to grow. So we broke up in January of 2019. And by March, I had chosen a donor and was doing IUIs, and I was devastated. Like, it was not at all what I wanted to be doing, but I felt like I didn't have a choice if I wanted to be a mom.
So you didn't go through any particular analysis of single motherhood I mean, some people go at it at a very cerebral, sort of objective
Yeah.
way, and others are very heart led. And it sounds like you were
Yeah.
heart
No,
led.
I mean, at that time, I didn't feel like I had time for any of that. So I went through 6 IUIs. I had a miscarriage after the 4th IUI. And each time, I would say I went in really divided on whether or not I even wanted it to work. And I felt a huge sense of relief when it didn't work, but also fear, because if it didn't work this time, maybe it will never work. I was not ready to conceive as a solo person when I was first started down that path. I just was slightly more compelled by the desire to be a mom someday than I was by the fear that this was like absolutely not the right path for me. I would not recommend it to anyone. I am not like, did not love that part of my journey, but I learned so much through it. And by the time I did conceive my son, I was in a very, very, very different emotional space, but it was 19 months later. So I had a lot of life between that first IUI and actually conceiving from a place of feeling like it was the right choice at that time.
Well, and I think that's one thing about fertility treatments. Some people going in think it's going to be a quick process, but honestly, it takes quite a lot of time, no matter whether you're going through, IUI, IVF. It's not a silver bullet.
Mhm.
So you talked about becoming a single mother feeling like a consolation prize approach, but when did that really start to shift for you, and what shifted that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the same kind of trajectory as I was going through all of these IUIs and feeling different levels of and different versions of devastation, devastation that it didn't work, devastation, even when it did work. I had the fourth IUI did result in a positive pregnancy test. And I was so, so sad. And that's not what I had expected that to feel like. Like I just thought a pink line on a pregnancy test would trump any of the other complex feelings that I was having. And that's not what that felt like. And then that pregnancy wasn't viable. And that also was devastating. I mean, there was no winning, right? In that whole period of my life. I think I was just looking for any kind of relief. And a couple years prior, so this was all 2019. In 2015, I had stumbled across a podcast that was sort of a life coach podcast. And I had listened to every episode. And I was starting to then find other books and podcasts written by people who had gone through this women's coach training and just like anything in this realm of really mindset work. And it helped. And I couldn't believe how much it helped to be consuming this kind of constant stream of you choose your thoughts and your thoughts create your reality.
Yep.
And that I don't know that I believed it at first, but I was like, but if that was true, it would be really nice. But the more I sort of played in that world of mindset, the more I realized like, this is actually changing every minute of my life. And I don't think many people know this, but when I chose the title, The Single Greatest Choice for my podcast, I was thinking in big part about that, about the choices that we make and the way that we frame things and the way that we think about things, that truly to me is the single greatest choice that we have in any given moment, not just that solo motherhood. I mean, it also works for, single motherhood by choice.
Sure.
But I think, a lot of people want to know, like, what are the hacks? What are the things that make solo motherhood easier? And they want you to tell them about like a stroller you can collapse with one hand or something. And like, it really is about how you're thinking and how you decide who you decide to be inside the story of your life, right?
That's so true. And what you were describing, I think it's striking when you say that you were sad when you got pregnant, sad when you had the loss. I think that process of choosing single motherhood, there is a grief portion to that, right? That is the departure of, well, this is the way that I thought my life was going to be, and this is the life. This is a different kind of life that I'm choosing. How important do you think it is to grieve that? The loss of that's one of the fairy tales I think that I talk about. How important is it to grieve that? And did you?
The loss of like the partner, like the fairy tale,
the utopic, the utopic family, the man and woman marital bliss and family from that.
I think it's so important. And of course, I listen to a lot of women sort of try to rectify this and process through it. And one of the things that I see is sort of bypassing by moving into a space of like, well, I don't know anyone who's actually happily married, or most relationships aren't what they appear to be on the outside, or, just trying to kind of soothe ourselves by believing that maybe there isn't such thing as a good relationship. And I really see that as such, it makes sense as a protective measure, but I think it prevents us from grieving that whether or not it exists, right? Like it exists in our heart, it exists in our mind, it exists as a desire that deserves to be acknowledged. It is the thing that we were, you might argue, programmed by society to want, but we do actually want it, right? And it's hard to not get what we want. And I think that deserves some space. And you can also pair that with, and I'm this age, and here's what my fertility testing says, and I haven't had successful relationships in the past, but it doesn't bypass the reality of that grief. And the way I talk about it with my clients is what we want just wasn't on the menu. And at that time in your life where you're ready for motherhood and you're ready to ensure that that's going to be a part of your story, it can really, really suck that what you want is not on the menu. And you can acknowledge that, like, I'm not going to argue with reality. What I want I can't order it off the cosmic menu, right? You can pick something else, a different entree. You can go with the solo motherhood, but that doesn't mean you're not allowed to be sad about this. And you know, and you can also acknowledge that it is kind of a made up story. This fairy tale. It may not exist in the version that you have in your head, but you're still allowed to want it and be sad that it isn't the life that you're living right now.
Right. So the key there is really just giving that some attention, not ignoring that, kind of dealing with those emotions head on, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the number one thing I talk about in all the various spaces, whether it's in my membership or in coaching, is just self-compassion and just how human it is to want what we want and feel sad when it's not available to us. That makes total sense, whether it's something as big as the life that we imagined or, you know, my toddler. I mean, I remember having one of the most ridiculous conversations of my life when my little 2-year-old son wanted to get inside the dishwasher and he was devastated that that was not an option. It was not on the menu, you know, and I'm like, okay,
Because that seems so fun.
I see what you're saying there, and also you're not going in there. Sorry. We're allowed to want what we want and be sad that we can't have it. But that doesn't mean that it was ever on the menu for us, just as climbing the dishwasher was not on his.
Right. So ultimately, you chose a sperm donor to conceive. And did you put any special thought into what sperm bank you were going to use, or how did you go through that process? And I don't remember, did you use an anonymous donor?
Yes. I did not put any thought into this. This was 2018 when I made the decision. Moving into 2019 is when I started trying to conceive. And there just maybe the information was out there and I didn't find it. Maybe I didn't look hard enough. There was not the same conversation happening that is happening now. And there certainly weren't some of the options that are available now in terms of known donors and things like that. I did start by asking a couple of people in my network. And there was one friend in particular who was open to being a known donor. And I strongly considered that. I was a little bit concerned about boundaries and resentment creeping in and just like that there might be some weirdness. And I didn't want to lose the friendship over just kind of making the wrong call there. But that same terrible fertility clinic where I started just shut it down. He was like, you don't have that kind of time. It's going to cause all this extra testing and like it'll cost you months that you don't have. So it's a no. You can go somewhere else if you want to do that. So he just refused to use a known donor at that clinic. So that was a clear no for me. The clinic did provide some names of sperm banks, and they were all the big ones. You know, Fairfax, California Cryo, Zytec.
Right.
So I think I didn't really compare one to another. I didn't really understand that there even were differences. I just chose a donor. The first donor that I chose, I really prioritized the physical appearance being similar to my family. And my thought process was around kind of my child's identity, kind of understanding who he was or she, that I wanted my child to look like he belonged in my family, just to kind of help them feel like they knew where they came from. And there were only a couple vials left of that donor. I did a few IUIs. It didn't work. And then if you remember back to the fertility journey, you get if you're doing IUIs, you get a negative positive or negative pregnancy test. And basically that next cycle is starting same day. So I was in a position where I found out I wasn't pregnant and had to choose a new donor like within 48 hours. So the second donor that I chose was kind of a runner up. Like he'd been in my cart or in my saved profiles for a while. And I just didn't feel great about it. It was like really I just had to make a quick decision. And I remember just thinking, I can't believe the donor I end up with might be like my second choice. Like I'm only choosing him because the other one was sold out and it wasn't even like a close call between the two. So that was the one that I ended up having the miscarriage with. And I think that fed into a bit of the grief that I felt because I didn't feel confident about that donor being a good choice for me. So then when I had to do it over again, I completely threw out everything that I was prioritizing in terms of looking like my family, level of education, like just all of these things that I thought mattered. And I just thought, I just want to choose someone that I could imagine sitting across the table from, whether or not that ever happened, that I would like this person. Like that if I had coffee with this person, I'd be like, he seems great, you know, like I like him. And so that was honestly my only filter. And I remember going back to the same sperm bank and looking through all the same exact profiles because all of this was happening in a relatively short span of time. So there really weren't new options. And I just thought, I just can't choose somebody that I've skimmed past in the past. So I was at my dad's house and I decided to pay for the like extra level of access to a new sperm bank and really looked at maybe 2 or 3 profiles. And then my dad came in the room and we had been swimming that day. And he said, if you're going to take a shower before we go to dinner, you need to hurry because we're getting ready to go. So I closed the laptop, ran upstairs, took my shower. And while I was in the shower, I realized that was my donor. And I still had a towel on my head when I went and like added to cart and bought my vials. I didn't even read his full profile, Sherry. Like I knew it. Like it was a gut.
Wow.
And it was so cool because I usually operate from my head, but I truly make the best decisions from my gut. And so it was so weird to come home from dinner and be like, I didn't even see all the pictures. There's more to the profile than I looked at before I made the decision. But I truly feel like it was just very gut led. And it was an open ID at 18. So I had no expectation that this was a person I would connect with, this early in the game. However, for him, it's been really important to make himself available to families that are interested in connecting. So he had already put himself out there, and his mom as well. They had put themselves on like DNA sites and things like that. But also Zytex at the time had a forum where families could connect with one another who use the same donor, and donors could also participate in that. So some of the families that were in my donor sibling group had already made contact with this donor. So without knowing that was going to be an option, I did sort of end up with a known donor who I'm now in contact with. It's pretty sporadic, but I follow him on Instagram and have his email address, and we've had a few conversations, and he does seem like someone I would be happy to sit across from and have a coffee or something. So it all worked out really well.
Right. Well, so we kind of went from the sperm selection into that whole other area, which I think is fascinating. Something that I never did, which was really looking into other family and knowing the donor and things like that. So, who have you connected with other siblings, and what has that been like?
Yeah, I have. It's been really interesting. I think at first it really freaked me out. So just full disclosure, I chose this donor. I did 2 IUIs with this third and final donor that were unsuccessful. Then I moved clinics and I started the IVF process. And that was very successful for me. I ended up with more embryos than I would ever need to have the family that my heart desired. And I realized I can take a break. Like I can get emotionally ready because now I've got the biological possibility sort of on ice. So I really got to take the time to wrap my head around this decision that I was making. And there were some really profound things that happened in that time frame. But one of the things that happened was that I got into a Facebook group it was just the big Zytex Facebook group. And I typed in my donor number and it pulled up a thread of a bunch of people who had mentioned this donor and lots of families who had used this donor. And it freaked me out. I was so freaked out. It was cool to see some of the babies. They were very cute. At this point, I had embryos that were frozen. I had not tried to get pregnant with the embryos yet. But it just was, I don't know why it was so difficult, but I think I knew in theory there would be other families. I didn't realize how many. It was weird to think about them actually being out there. Like it just completely freaked me out. So I took a step back. I got out of the Facebook group. I scheduled some therapy appointments. And I would say that really put my whole journey on pause, but for a couple of months while I processed, why does this feel like, what am I feeling about all of this? But by the time I was pregnant, I was a little bit more open to, I think I was just excited. I was excited to meet my son. I was excited to kind of dream about who he was going to be. I was in a very different headspace. And I got back into the Facebook group and started to kind of converse with some of the other families, and I thought their babies were so cute. And it was helpful in that stage. I think I did my first Zoom call with a few of the moms when I was pregnant. And it's an interesting connection because these are total strangers.
Yeah.
But there's this automatic affinity. When I see photos of these other kids, it's like, some of them are truly like nieces and nephews to me because I've gotten to know their families. Others are strangers who share my son's DNA, but I automatically just have this love for them, and I see the little similarities, and it just is a really sweet and kind of unexpected connection. And there's a I would say a core group of us who's made an effort to get together. Lucky for me, they like to come here to Austin because it's central and they're on both coasts, so it works out well. So I haven't
Okay.
come to them, but they've come to Austin, I think 3 times now, and the group grows every year. I think this last time we had 10 kids, and it's a mix of solo moms and lesbian couples and different, family configurations. And sometimes it's a solo mom with 2 kids, sometimes it's a lesbian couple with 1 kid, but it's all different arrangements. And lots of girls, a few boys. I think a lot of solo moms end up choosing female embryos if they have the chance. But we've gotten together, and it's been so fun to see the kids play with one another and connect with one another. And at this point, we called, or at least the language that I've used and that we've kind of agreed amongst the moms, is that these are friends who share your donor. And so my son is familiar with his story. He understands he's donor conceived. He would recognize a photo of his donor. He knows his donor's name and his donor's cat's name. And then he knows that these friends share his donor. We don't say sibling yet, because I think as someone who's growing up without a sibling in the house, he's still just kind of understanding, like that would be confusing at this point. But we will introduce that biological connection as it feels more age appropriate.
Interesting. Yeah. This is something I'm, potentially interested in exploring for my son. My son's much older. He'll be 11. But this is something you really opened up for me. So, um, you've talked really candidly and transparently about kind of the good and the bad of being kind of a single mother by choice. Um, what has surprised you about the journey?
Oh, I love this question. I think what has surprised me is just who I've become. I I love myself, like this version of myself so much more. I'm like so much more myself and so much more confident in myself than I ever could have been. And maybe this is just what happens in your 40s, but because I had my son just as I was turning 40, I just have never been this comfortable in my own skin. And as I've built my business alongside, because my son and my business are essentially the same age, it's all kind of happened simultaneously. I've just watched myself become this woman who can do things that 5 years ago, that version of me would have been like, "You did what? Like, are you kidding me?" And it's just been such an adventure. And I think as I've built my business, when I first started, I thought I was just wanting, not just, it still would be a very noble cause, but I thought I wanted to just support women in the logistics of the process and some of the mindset pieces as well. But just like, let me just like build community and support women. That felt like the call. And over time, I started to see that what I really want to offer is kind of what we were talking about before, this mindset piece of how much autonomy we have in creating the lives that we want for ourselves, just in the way that we think. And as I've moved into this sort of more developed stage of the journey of the motherhood journey, but also the business journey, what I've realized is truly my mission, truly my calling, is that I think that women who consider this choice or pursue this choice are already the type of women who can absolutely blow their own minds, who can do just the most incredible things. I think that we have such just untapped potential. And I think that the decision to go into solo motherhood oftentimes is the catalyst where we're like, what if none of the script about life is relevant to me anymore? Like, what if I could truly do anything, right? So I'm getting to live
Yeah.
it as I've created this career for myself and this life for myself. I'm getting to do it, but I'm also, my goal is to inspire other women to just really like F the conventions and be who you want to be. And if having a baby is part of that, awesome. If having 2 babies is part of that, great. If
Mm.
having 2 babies is part of that, but you're glad that you explored it so that you made the decision not to, instead of having life happen to you. I think I have women in my community who are like, that will be their ultimate decision. I'm not an evangelist for solo motherhood. Like, I don't think everyone should do it, but I think everyone should choose, right?
Right. It seems like making that choice and an empowered choice can lead to other empowered choices, because we realize that the limitations that we have on ourselves are sort of our choice. They are our decision, and we can make a different decision than
Yes.
that. And it's not necessarily reflective of how capable we are, or, you know, that we could do something different, that we can follow our passion, whether it's about children or business or
Mhm.
whatever. So I
Yes.
love that. So like me, you are a mom of a boy. And so one of the things that I thought about is, how do I navigate having a son? Because I always envisioned that I would have girls. And when I found out I was going to have a boy, it kind of gave me a bit of a crisis, because I had some issues with some of the men in my life, obviously past relationships, also father, brother. I had some things. And so I had to work through that. But what things have you done to kind of figure out how you're going to help your son know how to be a man in this world? Like, what
Mm.
are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, okay. I want to answer that question, but I also want to circle back because I am a solo mom who chose to have a boy. So I had both male and female embryos. And in fact, my healthiest embryo was a female embryo. And so I bypassed that one and went to the second one intentionally to choose to have a son. And part of that for me was that I have or have had somewhat of a strained relationship with my own mom, and just worried about my capacity to parent a daughter, right? And so I think one of the most profound parts of motherhood for me has been how healing it's been to my inner child, um, to get to sort of like reparent or just find this deep compassion for my parents. The number of times I've realized my parents were 20 years younger than me when they were doing the exact same things that I'm attempting to do with my own child. Like, oh my gosh, no wonder they effed it up. Like, no one, and they
Yeah.
didn't even F it up that badly, you know? And so I think that it's an interesting place to be for some of us in the IVF space to even have that choice. But, whether you choose it or don't choose it, I believe that the universe gives us exactly what we need to heal. And so I'm sure you could think of a million ways that both your daughter and your son have brought like healing and growth and all of the things to your soul.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And that was because I was seeing a counselor at the time, and I remember saying, "Well, what if he hurts me? What if he rejects me?" And all of these things. And
mhm,
the answer that came back from the counselor was, "But what if he doesn't? And what if truly he is your opportunity to heal?" And so that really put me on a far different path. But
yeah.
there still are very practical things of, as women, we can't exemplify all the things that
Yes. Yes. And I do
that
want
a
to answer that
man
part of
would.
your question. Yes.
Yeah. And so what do how have you looked at that?
Yeah. I think that that was much scarier to me before I knew my son. And now I've just realized how connected the two of us are, and um how important it is to me to like pay attention to what he wants and what he needs. And I trust that connection between us, like I'll notice if what he's getting is not the right support or enough support. And so I don't think that I'm in any way done thinking about this question, but I think in this stage, I feel really comfortable about the ways it sort of played out. Just some tangible things. I've chose a male pediatrician who is on the younger end, because I wanted to develop that relationship from the start, and always have, just for like the medical and biological pieces of it, uh, a male that mom can go fill out some forms in the front office, and leave him in there, and have the medical stuff sort of covered, or the all the puberty things. I take him to a barber shop, like I'm the only woman in there every time we go.
Yeah.
Because I just think that, that's a place where he can be a dude. And I sit in the waiting area. I don't stay with him while he's getting his haircut. We have a neighbor next door who is retired. He's got 3 adult sons, and he's always out working on cars and working in the yard. He spends a lot of time in the front of his house. And when my son gets out of the car, he almost always runs across and goes and talks to Mr. Patrick. And I hang back and I let them kind of have that time together. And I'm aware of the men in our lives so far, the friends, dads, the uncles, that, the people that I really try to give space to those relationships to grow as they will. And I will look for opportunities in the future with coaches and, teachers and camp counselors and, different things. But I also think it's valuable to ask, like, whose need is this? Is he truly showing signs that he really could benefit from a strong male role model? Or is that my programming? Is that
Your
my
narrative. Yeah. Yeah.
And so am I trying to solve a problem that doesn't currently exist? And that to me feels more relevant right now and at this stage when boys and girls are really they're just kids, right? They haven't really gone into these like really gendered places yet. He hasn't quite turned 5. He turns 5 this month. And I just assume that this will be an evolving thing that I'm thinking about and that I'm aware of, but I also don't want to make it a bigger deal than it is. He's got very close relationships with his grandpa, my dad, and my dad's husband. So they're 2 gay men. I'm like, this is a very different male role model probably than he's not learning football over there. He's learning show tunes, But that's right. Like his expression of masculinity will be his own road to forge. And I think that something that really helps me as a parent is that I want to be really clear on what is and isn't my responsibility. So obviously I have major responsibilities when it comes to his health and safety and providing for him and supporting him in his emotional development. But his relationships and his identity, like those are his own. Yeah. And I can just watch and wait and support without needing to micromanage.
Right. I love that. And so we talked about, this community that you've built. And one of the things that I was really interested in is you guys have traveled together. So you've done, and I read your blog post about, or your newsletter about your most recent trip and all the, sort of the unexpected and the wonderful and all the various things that happen. But maybe you could just share, are you planning to continue doing those kinds of trips?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Well, then maybe share a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah, I do 2 different types of travel opportunities. One I refer to as retreats and the other as family trips. They are very different. So I run retreats for women in the thinking and trying stages or in pregnancy, as long as they're, cleared to travel. And those retreats are very curated. They're very small. It's usually 8 to 10 women. It's somewhere beautiful. We do a mix of like outdoor activities and yoga and meditation and journaling. It's a retreat. It's a true retreat, right? Kids don't come on those trips. I also do family trips, and those so far have been at the same resort both times, all inclusive, because it just makes it easy. I mean, with our last group, we requested 41 cribs from the resort. So it has to be a place with the capacity to like hold that large of a group and all of those needs. Right now, I would say my community is the children are very young. So that's sort of dictating, like I chose a resort that has childcare starting at age 1. A lot of the all-inclusive start around like age 3 or 4. So where we go and what we do and what that looks like will probably develop as the community sort of grows up. Women with younger kids will always be invited along, but I think that I will probably have a mix of like trips that make sense for older kids and trips that make sense for younger kids. But the all-inclusive is just the way to go. You don't have to carry your wallet around. It doesn't matter if your kid eats 2 bites of the, pizza that you ordered, and just makes it easy. So we've been going to Mexico, and the resort that we have gone to twice now is in Riviera Maya. And some of the same families have attended both times. It's been also different families. I plan to do it a couple of times a year. And like you said, you did your scouting trip with your son. My son and I are taking a scouting trip this summer to check out some other resorts, because it would be really hard, I think, to facilitate somewhere that I had never been. So
sure.
Poor me, I have to plan a work trip to a resort.
Well, that's cool. Well,
Yeah.
I'll definitely include some information about those trips. And I just think that, doing that kind of adventure with other single mothers by choice is really a phenomenal opportunity. And I just think that's a really cool thing you're doing. So best of luck with that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think as the kids are so young, they may not be picking up yet on what's happening. But for the moms, I mean, something that I noticed while we were there is that conversations really could just kind of start in the middle, because there was no like, is it going to be weird for you to talk about donor conception? Or like, we sort of got all the fluff out of the way by just default of knowing who we were traveling with. So the conversations could just sort of pick up in the middle. And it really was, I mean, we were all chasing our kids around. So it was just as chaotic as you can imagine. There weren't like these deep conversations necessarily happening all of the time, but just the shared experience of, like, I found myself holding a baby while a mom was filling up her plate at the buffet. And I'm like, I don't actually even know this kid's name, but it doesn't matter. Like, I'm just holding this baby for a minute, just
Right.
understanding that you don't have to ask someone to pick up the end of your stroller to go up the couple of stairs. And, it just is so nice to have that support. And I think for the kids, as they get older, we have different communities depending on where families live. Like some cities have really robust solo mom meetup groups and things like that. Others don't as much. But to have that touch point throughout the year where your child, when they're my son's age or even older, just knows like all those kids that were there, they all have a family that looks like mine. They all also have a donor. And just to have that touch point of like, maybe my family isn't so unusual.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, from the studies that I've seen, I think that a lot of adult children of single mothers by choice really feel that their upbringing was quite normal and
Mhm.
that they felt that they were anchored around such a strong and determined female figure that makes that is a very grounding thing for them. But I do
Mhm.
love this idea of having an abundance of other examples
Mhm.
of great families that they're connected with. So I think that's super cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, so I'm just going to ask you one other question, which is just, what advice would you have for a woman who is considering becoming a single mother by choice? What words of wisdom might you have for her?
Yeah, I think what I see so often is that um, in that early stage, we make up a lot of stories and then live as if they are the absolute truth. So things like, I can't do this because I don't have family living locally to me, or this will never work because I've got like, I do shifts at the hospital and you can't get 24-hour childcare, or, those types of stories. I think women stay stuck for so long in stories that they just truly made up, but they think that they're the truth, right? And so one of the ways that I've seen most effective to sort of getting out of those made up versions of the truth is to get in community with other women who are doing this, have done it, or considering it, and just talking through those fears. I had a woman, I do these community groups about every 6 weeks. And I had a woman who we had a conversation and she said, I just don't know. I don't know if I should join. I feel I'm a teacher and my income is just like probably not enough to support a child. And I don't want to get excited and hopeful and then find out that it's not going to work for me. And I said, well, why don't you just join? Just come to the first night. If it doesn't feel like a good fit, I'm happy to refund you your money. And so the group hasn't started yet. It starts on Wednesday, but we've started the WhatsApp group. I kid you not, there are 6 teachers in this group. Like, they're introducing themselves and they're like, I'm a teacher, I'm a teacher, I'm a teacher. There's like 3 kindergarten teachers in the group. I've never had that many teachers all in one group, but I'm like, the universe did that for her. Like
Right.
that was the expansion that she needed. She could never attend the group in person. She has what she needs now. She knows teachers can do this, right? And so
Yeah.
there's just a million versions of that story that I think that's why I do the podcast. I'm sure that's why you do a lot of the things you do, why you wrote your book, like just that expansion of possibility. When you see one person do it, you're like, maybe it's not as impossible as I thought it was. So getting in community, whether it's a local community, an online community, reading books like yours, listening to podcasts like both of ours, I just think that that is the most important thing you can do for yourself.
I love that. Just the openness to the possibilities, I think, is amazing. And then I always talk about it as, this is a journey of love, and you really just have to see where it leads you.
Absolutely.
So, on that, I think that's the perfect way to close. I want to thank you so much for being here. I love our conversations.
Yeah,
And for anyone who's listening, I just want to let you know you can fulfill your dream of motherhood. I think, it takes knowledge, courage, determination, and a village that loves you. But with those things, anything is possible. So I invite you to check out the resources at Cherie's Choice. We will have this interview there. And please feel free to reach out to myself or reach out to Katie if you need any support on your journey to motherhood. We would love to be able to walk alongside you for that journey. So until next time, thanks so much.
Thank you, Cherie.
Mhm.